And now I want to bring in CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. Camilo, DHS implemented a new rule for congressional visits to ICE facilities. Can you explain this new policy, and do we expect it'll be challenged?
Good morning, Mugo. Yes, that is completely right. The Department of Homeland Security, for context, back in December, was blocked by a federal judge in Washington, D.C. from enforcing and implementing a policy that sought to require members of Congress to submit requests to inspect immigration and customs enforcement detention facilities 7 days in advance of actually visiting such centers across the country. But that federal judge said that DHS appropriations law created by Congress prohibited funds and money from being used by officials to restrict or otherwise prevent members of Congress from conducting congressional oversight over ICE detention facilities. That policy was blocked. But now last week, the Department of Homeland Security, through a new memo by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, has reimposed that 7-day prior notice requirement for members of Congress who are looking to inspect facilities. This time around, however, the Department of Homeland Security and Secretary Noem are saying that the new policy, this new restriction that requires members of Congress to submit requests a week in advance of visiting any facility, will be enforced through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, that legislation that President Trump, of course, signed into law back in the summer that gave ICE billions of dollars to expand its detention capacity and to bolster deportation efforts. So essentially, Mugo, in other words, the Department of Homeland Security is reimposing that restriction on congressional oversight at detention facilities, but now citing a new stream and pool of funding.
And Camilo, I know you've been tracking all these immigration raids. So at this point, just how many people have been arrested?
Mugo, as of last week, according to agency data, ICE was holding about 69,000 people across the country in detention facilities, people, again, who are facing deportation because of suspected violations of federal immigration law. That is the highest tally in the agency's history. About 48% or 33,000 of the detainees currently in ICE custody, according to the federal data, are non-criminal detainees who do not have a criminal record, a charge, or a conviction, and were being held solely, Mugo, because of civil immigration violations. About 26% of the detainees held by ICE did have criminal charges, and the other 26% had criminal convictions, but the data does not show or illustrate the severity of those crimes. And again, this shows, as we know, that many of the people who are being arrested, detained, and processed for deportation under the second Trump administration are people who are in the country illegally, yes, Mugo, allegedly, but don't have any criminal record.
All right, Camilo Montoya-Galvez, appreciate that breakdown.